Welcome to On Map, On Mission, the very first episode of our brand new show from TheMET Church. Well, we're going to have conversations around what does it look like to live on mission wherever we may be. So come on in, join us on a regular basis for some great conversations. Well, Matt, we're sitting here like in this pretty cool little set.
This is very cool.
This is the first conversation, the first, what do you call it, pilot episode of On Map, On Mission.
The podcast.
You know, we've been doing a podcast for a little while, on and off, here and there, and some of the people listening or watching right now have heard that, but this is a whole new expression going on video and talking about what it means to live on mission, and so we're calling it On Map, On Mission, which I think is awesome.
I'm pretty excited about it because, I mean, we've all listened to podcasts, our favorite authors or speakers or favorite content or following different people. But I thought, what a great idea that you and your team had about, what would it look like for us to really provide a resource for our own folks and for potentially see what God does with it. And I'm like, that's a great idea. And then to come up and to see what you guys have kind of created is pretty exciting. It looks amazing in here.
Doesn't it look great? They did a great job. So the pressure now is if we can match the level of conversation to the environment, slam dunk.
Should
baby.
be awesome.
That's right.
All right.
So let's just talk a little bit about why are we even doing this? Why do we feel like more content in people's lives is going to benefit them? Why do we think that the people here at TheMET Church are interested in more conversation around what it means to live out our mission, to be a disciple maker in every space, every nook and cranny of life? Let's talk about that for a minute. Why is this important?
Yeah, man. I think it's a great question. And I won't go all the way back, but I just remember 7 or 8 years ago where we were probably what I would call a more Sunday-oriented church, and now to be what I would call more Sunday a second, more discipleship-first church. There's been a lot of shifts and a lot of changes. Some of those have not, some of those have come with great sacrifice, whether it's people that had to leave or planting churches that we were all combined. I mean, there's so many things that went through that. But this idea of, I think, living on mission, it just has this responsibility attached to it. And I think people feel in general, and I'll speak for me, I have a sense of feeling like I know that that's right, but I don't always know the in and out of how I'm supposed to execute that in my own life. And I can't get that in 28 minutes on a Sunday morning, or if I'm talking 48 minutes on a Sunday. No, I can't.
But it's 48 great minutes.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Well, 47 great minutes.
That last minute's
always a stretch.
I don't know. I feel like there's a need out there for practical, hey, help me living on mission. And we did this series, I don't know.
2020.
A couple years ago. Just, hey, wherever you go, there it is.
There it is.
There it is. You wherever you are on the map, pull up a Google map and that blue dot comes and it shows you where you are. Your mission field is right there. And it's just not a mindset that I think people engage enough, right? I mean, do you feel that same way?
I do. I think that from just, again, speaking just for myself, I've always thought about how do I bring my faith? How do I bring what Jesus has done in my life into the other places of life? And I think, because I go, well, if I'm supposed to bring my church experience into my workplace, I struggle. I can't make that connection because it's two totally different environments. But when I start to think about, well, if my life is about inviting people into relationship first, and then maybe sharing who I am and my faith and God's calling on my life, God's purpose for my life, that tends to make it much more less threatening. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So if I'm like relationships first, which is really what our mission is all about, is inviting people into meaningful relationship with God and each other. Yeah. And that just makes sense to me, and I hope it does for a lot of other people.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to a lot of great places over the years with compelling mission statements, but I'm as excited about the mission statement of this local church as I have been about any organization I've ever been a part of in my 20 plus years of ministry. And it really is one of the most powerful tools, I think, is the power of your invitation. But the scary part is, well, inviting them into what? I mean, what am I supposed to be inviting them into? Okay, a meaningful relationship. Well, don't I have that? I don't have any more room for relationships. I've got the softball team and all those parents. I've got the team that I lead in my work. I've got this, maybe you're a mom and you're listening. You've got a group of women that you hang out with, or maybe you're a CEO of a company and you've got this entire organization on your shoulders. I mean, it's just like, it can't look the same for everybody, dang it. That's the tension.
Yeah.
And yet, what does it mean for me to live missionally? I love, and I've heard this said before, but we've overcomplicated what it means to live missionally. We think it's about what we know, not necessarily about who we are. And so what we end up doing is we actually we personally check ourselves off of the missional list because we don't feel like we're capable or that we know enough. We'll just leave that to the pastor, leave that to the small group leaders. They really understand it. They know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. So I'm just going to come receive. How many times I heard it today? I'm just coming to soak it up. I'm coming to soak it up. And I'm like, yeah, but if you just keep soaking and soaking, but you never go and live it out and take it to someone else, you're missing out on some of the most rich, rewarding stuff that's out there.
Yeah. I've struggled with this idea of I've got to bring back information. Like that's my God's calling in my life, is to bring this information into someone else's life. And it just so simplifies it when I'm like, no, just inviting people into relationship. That's the start of it all. Information might come later, but it just makes so much sense. And then we talk about on mission, and it was just this funny conversation with a friend of ours named Josh. He had the idea, like, let's just call this On Map on Mission, talking about that series that we did. And because he said, so wherever I am, there it is. Well, what do you mean? Well, wherever I am on the map, there is my mission.
I know, it was a brilliant
I can live
idea.
it out at all times, loving God, loving my neighbor, inviting into relationship, even though, I might have a few guys I'm really close to, but let's say I'm, on the soccer field with my kids, but I'm present relationally in that moment, or I'm in the office with someone and maybe we're not best friends or doing vacation together, but I'm present relationally in that environment.
Yeah.
I'm living on mission wherever I am. It's great. I love it.
It's funny. I always just was taught that it was more complicated than that, but I'm thinking of one. I won't use names, but there's a group of us that get together occasionally on Sunday nights and hang out. And I remember this one particular guy, and at first he was super quiet, and he just wouldn't say much. And he was cordial, friendly, but he just wouldn't say a whole lot. And I remember always thinking, like, I wonder what if he's ever going to open up. And lo and behold, here we are. I don't know, it was probably 6 or 8 times we had met, and some of the most intentional, brilliant questions came out of this guy's mouth. I was like, man. And he was walking through some family dynamics and some work dynamics, and he was willing, in the context of, okay, now I trust these people. Now I'm gonna kind of push the boundary of my personal trust. I want to see, and of course, your response is so critical in those moments.
Yeah.
But to watch him put it out there, and to watch nobody around the circle do anything different other than go, "Hey, man, thanks for sharing that." He wasn't necessarily looking for answers in the moment, but he was looking for relationship in the moment. And I wasn't expecting to be discipling anybody in that moment, but maybe I will. You see what I'm saying? The informality of it is often, it's like one of the parts of its brilliance. Jesus was the same way, right? Like, guys said, "Hey, where are you staying?" He didn't look at him and go, "Well, here's my address, here's my card, call my personal assistant. She'll get us on the calendar. We can go grab a cup of coffee." Like, this is not how he did it. He was so much like, "Hey, just
along the way,
why don't you come see?" And it says they hung out with him the rest of the day. And this is how he did life with the people. And so I think that Jesus modeled something that we hear in On Map on Mission, right? It didn't matter if he was at a well with a woman he knew was living in sin, or whether he was meeting at night with one of the religious leaders secretly on a roof somewhere. Wherever he was, he just lived it out, just walked it out.
Well, it even brings us back to like the scriptures where it was in the invitation. It was like, wasn't it in John 1 or Luke 1 or all the Gospels where Jesus starts inviting these guys to just follow him? And it's just a simple invitation. And that's why we love talking about our mission begins with that word inviting.
Yeah. And if you pare it down to like On Map on Mission, you realize the God that we worship, the God that we're talking about on this podcast, is a relational God. He exists in relationship, right? He He desires relationship with each and every one of us. And uniquely, he wants to be unified with us and in fellowship with us. And, he wants us to understand that we can trust him and be vulnerable with him, that he knows the ins and outs. And his invitation is the model of this entire thing anyway. So you talk about the power of invitation. I'm thinking, how grateful are we that the God who created us in spite of our sin says, hey, I'm going to invite you into something, and then I'm going to ask you to invite other people into it.
Right.
It's pretty great.
I don't know, Matt, you're making it sound a lot more relational than what some of us hear about doing the right thing and being the right kind of person. But that's just the beauty of it.
It's
relationship. So as we kind of get into these conversations, hopefully on a frequent basis, talking about how do we live the mission of inviting people into meaningful relationship wherever we are, whenever we are, what would you say to people who are watching that are like, well, okay, that sounds easy for you because you're an extrovert, you're a relational person, you gravitate toward that kind of stuff, but I just feel uncomfortable in any sense of transparency and vulnerability with people. And talk to us just for a moment about why is that important? If we're going to invite people into relationship, why should we consider we've got to lead the way with what relationship looks like?
I mean, dude, my first pushback would be like, introverted or extroverted, we all know how to be in relationship with people because that's what makes the world go round. Everybody's like, money makes the world go round. No, it's not. That's transaction. Relationship makes the world go round. And introverted or extroverted, when you get close enough to someone where you can trust them, it might take someone longer than someone else, but nobody is, exempt from living this type of life out. You're going to go find yourself in a hole. You're going to be a workaholic with everything around you all the time. You're going to be locked in a closet somewhere. No, that's not how we're made to live. So I don't like that idea, and I'm being a little bit pushy, right? I don't like that idea of like saying, yeah, but that's for you and it's not for me. Jesus didn't say like, hey, listen, if I've given you the personality for it, go make disciples of all nations. Like, that's not what he said.
Isn't that funny?
So he said, hey, listen, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So it's not going to be about your position. It's not going to be about how much you make. It's not going to be about whether you rule or I rule. That's Jesus's final, like, hey, listen, before I go, I just need to let you something. I am on the throne of this. I'm the king. And then he says, so go and make disciples. And he had modeled it over the entirety of his ministry of how to do it. He had these 12 people. And by the way, even one of the guys that was with him for 3 years didn't do his part. I don't know if Judas was an introvert or not and didn't like the idea, but he eventually kind of sold out on it and said, I'm done. Like, I'm not doing this. So that's my first response would be like, hey, be careful when you make Jesus's mission about how you're wired, because he didn't put that into the algorithm of success. He said, like, you're made for relationship. I want you to use that relational equity and authority with each other. I want you to use that to push my mission forward. And that's why you don't have to be on a pulpit and you don't have to be in a pew. You can be in a car ride. Some of the most powerful conversations I've had with you and me, been in a relationship for 10 years. Some of the most powerful conversations I've had with you are going to get an ice cream or a cup of coffee or a Coke somewhere. And finally, it's like all of the stuff that we have to do starts to just fall away. And I'm like, hey, man, can you just help me understand something here? I'm frustrated about this, or I'm not seeing this correctly. Or maybe the tables are turning. You're like, dude, can you give me some understanding here? Can I vent, I mean, how many of those conversations have we had? Yeah.
Well, if I know you're buying the ice cream, I'll pretty much say anything just to make sure we're getting.
Well, I'm glad that I know that now. You should have held that one. You should have held that one, because now I'm going to ask. Let's go. Hey, man, real quick. Are you buying? No, I mean, okay.
Well, okay. So think of this for a moment, though. If I'm going to invite people into if I'm a follower of Jesus, living on mission, knowing that involves inviting people into relationship, don't I have to have my stuff all cleaned up? Or am I going to be a bad witness for Christ?
He's pressing my buttons here, people.
You softballs,
no,
baby.
Yeah, but you're also you're just kind of messing with me, because you know that's such a passion point of mine. You know the answer to that. You know the answer to that. I mean, what would you say?
I would say your brokenness, your humanity is actually, in God's grace in your humanity is what's appealing to someone who doesn't know Christ.
Totally agree. Yeah. Totally
So if I'm trying to pretend I'm somebody I'm not, or I'm trying to protect, manage my image through trying to, never be ashamed of God transforming us and cleaning us up from sinful habits. That's wonderful. We're pursuing that.
For sure.
But in my weakness, in my humanity, in my brokenness, in my imperfection, if I'm honest with that in relationship with people, I think that actually what the relationship is built on.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're going to be honest and real. Yeah. Okay, I might be willing to do this.
Yeah. So many of these, I was thinking of so many of these trainings we've even been to over the years about how do I lead a small group effectively, or how do I, whatever. I'll be honest, some of the most powerful small group leaders I've ever had the pleasure of sitting under are the most vulnerable people. It's like they're willing to go first.
Isn't that funny?
They're just like, hey, I'm not going to try to tell you how to do this. I'm going to tell you where my personal, either my theology is struggling here, or maybe my marriage is on the rocks here, or maybe my job situation, I'm not responding the way that I ought to, or whatever the situation is. The vulnerability of the leader is such a critical component of being an effective disciple maker. And I think that's the first thing. I think that another thing I would just tell everyone listening, and to retell you and I sitting here as, executive staff level at this church, is this. Vulnerability is critical, but my yes also has to be on the table. There are so many times when I've taken something on and I felt internally like I could feel the Holy Spirit saying, hey, this is a moment. I'm like, man, I do not have time for this moment.
Yeah.
This moment. Yeah, you do. And there's so many times when I'm like, I'm juggling too many. And before you know it, this amazing opportunity for impact is waiting at the end of that yes. I recently met with some kids from a local school. They were going to lead. This band was going to get together and they were going to play. And I was asked to come be a part of this thing, and I didn't have time to be available.
Did you join the band?
I wanted to really bad. Yeah? I just didn't have the time to do it. Yeah. But a bunch of high schoolers, and I didn't know. They're like, well, listen, could you at least work with them? Could you get together with them? Because that's my heritage. I have a music degree. I'm comfortable in that space. I'm like, I don't have time to do 6 or 7 rehearsals with a bunch of teenagers. That is, and I let my position get in my way. And I got so convicted on Map on Mission. I'm like, here it is. Here it is. Just, where's your yes? So I say yes. This group of kids blew me away, not only with their talent, but we had an opportunity after every rehearsal. I sat at the piano at the end, had them all put their stuff down, had them gather around the piano. I said, let me teach you a song. I play. And I started asking them a couple of questions. Dude, the wisdom that they were imparting to one another and that was flowing out, I promise you it wasn't just musical development. Yeah. There was spiritual development there. And I'm like, dude, if I would have said no, I would have gone and had coffee with somebody that, for some pastor's lunch, or those things are fine and they're good. But if we're talking about living on mission, my position can get in my way a lot. And I need to remind myself in that, like, hey, dude, don't be scared to say yes. Because there's an opportunity of influence waiting on the other side of that. Sometimes you don't even see it.
Gosh. Well, I think if anybody's watching right now or listening and they're interested in these kinds of conversations, like real conversation about real life and trying to walk this following Jesus out in real life, I hope they come back and listen to this a lot more. This is just the first one, so we're just trying to feel this out, talk about what it's all about, and we're going to wrap it up here in a second. But any thoughts that you want to close it out with, or you can do cartwheels, handstand, whatever you want.
I'm just excited about it. I'm excited about it because I want to stay away from the idealism, platitude conversations. Yeah. And I want to move toward what it truly means to walk and live this out. And sometimes it's a band rehearsal on a Tuesday night. And sometimes it's a softball game on a Thursday night. And sometimes it's having dinner with a couple of people that you don't normally hang with. And there's so many opportunities for us to live
outside of Sunday morning.
I know, right? It's crazy. You mean I can't just slip in and slip
messing
out.
With my.
So what about? Thing. Just last thing from me to you. You've been a part of this culture for a couple of years now, and you've talked about your own personal transformation, even in some of that. What would you say is the most impactful part of this for you personally about living on Map on Mission? Because I've seen you what I'll use the word.
Careful now.
Yeah, I've seen you shift and alter maybe some of the ideals that you brought with you to the table into where you are now. I think it's not a massively different place, but maybe just a different focus.
Yeah, I think I'm more transactional in nature than relational, and that's been an asset and a liability. So what that means is like the dark side of being transactional first is I would tend to look at you or somebody and go, I wonder what I'm going to get out of this. I wonder where this is going to bring me, what it's going to do. And, or if it was just, I'm going to help Matt out because he needs the help, but I'm going to get some kudos for helping Matt out.
Sure.
This transaction, looking, what I can get in the moment. But when I start to shift that and go, no, this is all about relationship. And if I make that the priority, it just changes the tone of the whole relationship. Like, what do our interactions look like? What do I care about when I think about you, or those I'm trying to be in relationship with? What am I? To your point, you just said, what am I willing to share? How vulnerable am I willing to be? Because if we're going to be in relationship, I'm gonna say some things that you're going to have the opportunity to judge me.
Yeah,
no question.
Yep.
But I'm going to trust that God's grace in that is like, if I don't share that, then I'm not going to experience God's best because I'm not the real me. And every time I've found that I'm the real me, which is still always struggle, being your real self, doesn't mean you don't use wisdom. It doesn't mean you don't watch what you say, right? There's that side of, that's a different conversation. But whenever I've found that I'm willing to be the real me in relationship, that's where God meets me and does something that doesn't happen otherwise. Yeah.
So good. And I think that would probably be my own personal heart's desire for anyone listening, is that you'd be willing to literally work on this skill of living on mission wherever you are. And that's the heart behind On Map, On Mission, is that you start developing and exercising those muscles of living in relationship and inviting people into meaningful relationship and learning that every interaction has an opportunity attached to it. And that you have to go first. I mean, there's 20 episodes there waiting to happen. But I'm really excited about what conversations are waiting on the horizon for this. It's going to be great.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.